Hi guys, BuildZoid here, and today we're going to be going through the ASUS Z690 motherboard lineup. We're going to be using Newegg for prices because they seem to be the most reliable way of getting something close to MSRP. Let's get into it. We're just going to go in order. The first couple boards here are like CSM, and that's, I'll just scroll down to the explanation for that. Yeah, ASUS Corporate Stable Model, so like, I don't even know where you would get this version of these boards, so we're not going to take a look at those. Also, I think it's literally just like a BIOS update support type thing, so I'm not like, we're not covering that. Let's get into it, starting off with the incredibly overpriced Maximus Z690 formula. I mean, we can basically say every motherboard except the Apex. The Apex gets a pass, nothing else does. But yeah, starting off with the incredibly overpriced Maximus Z690 formula, which goes for, I think it's $800 or $900. $800 it is. Okay, yes. So incredibly overpriced. Yeah, incredibly overpriced, I'd say is fair. So let's see. Tech specs. DDR5, of course. You get two X8 PCIe slots, Gen 5, which this is functionality you can get on a $400 motherboard. And then they have the, oh yes, we have the Gen 5 M.2 slot, which is actually just one of your PCIe slots getting butchered in order to get you M.2 drives. So yeah, it'll, card is installed in, oh wait, that's an add-in card. Okay, actually I like that method. Where is that? Oh, they don't show a picture of the add-in card. So I don't mind a adapter from PCIe to whatever, because that's the whole point of having PCIe slots, is that you can convert them into other things. But there's a few boards out there which literally built into the motherboard is an M.2 slot that steals PCIe lanes from your main PCIe slots, and I think that's really dumb. But this right here, this I'm okay with. So I thought this was doing the same thing. I think it's the -E from ASUS that does that. And yeah, I think it's stupid. And ASRock has a motherboard that does it as well. It's the Velocita. Yeah, so this doesn't do that, and that's a good thing. Good job, ASUS. That add-in card's good. Weird M.2 slots that steal PCIe lanes bad. Right? Yeah, Hyper M.2 card is installed in a PCIe slot. Your second PCIe slot gets dropped to X8. And yeah, other way around. This is, man, this explanation here is like so idiot-proofed. That's the thing. I was initially confused. Like, wait, PCIe Gen what, like primary PCIe slot, secondary PCIe slot, and then it's like, oh, and if you install it in the secondary, then your primary drops down to X8. Well, yes, of course. I don't know why they need to explain this, but I guess some people have never looked at how a PCIe slot functions. So anyway, nothing wrong with that. I'm just surprised that they found it necessary to have such a long, wordy explanation for how that functions. And then they repeated it down here as well. Oh no, this is for the lower M.2, like lower PCIe slots. You get 10 gig LAN. No, I want to see the rear I/O on this. Oh, we don't have a picture of the rear I/O. What? And this is why you just open up the motherboard manual, because the best piece of, like, if you want to know what a motherboard actually does, don't look at the marketing material, look at the manual, because the manual actually explains what the motherboard does, whereas the marketing material is, trying to sell you the motherboard, not explaining to you how to use it. Anyway, so here we have an actual useful list of all the different features. Imagine that. Yeah, okay, that's mostly the same. Oh, they have the exact same explanations here. Cool, so don't really care. Do we have a block diagram? We should. ASUS generally has what I would consider pretty well idiot-proofed everything. So, yeah, we get a postcode, bunch of fan headers. You get a regular M.2 slot there, two more down here. Wait, this only has 3 M.2 slots on it? That's a bit... Like, personally, I don't care that much about M.2 slots. I'm just surprised that such an expensive motherboard only has 3 of them. Yeah, there's only 3 M.2 slots. And then other than that, you get... You get a flex key, a retry button, and a start button. They included a retry is a nice function to have, right? Because you also have BIOS flashback and clear CMOS in the rear I/O. So okay, yeah, that basically covers all the buttons you would really need. Daisy chain memory topology, of course, because that's standard. It's on an 8-layer PCB. Does this come with the extra overclocking stuff, or is it this literally just $800 to get a water block for the VRM, which definitely doesn't need it? Don't care. 105 amp power stages. Yes, we like I hate nominal current specs on power stages so much. It's like because even the documentation literally won't even tell you what happens when you push 105 amps through a 105 amp power stage, because what'll happen is it'll get way too damn hot and you shouldn't do that. So it's just kind of like, so it's really, and honestly, the 90s perform basically the same. Anyway, what else do we have? What about memory? A dedicated circuit. Well, I don't know how else you'd be connecting the memory. Right, and then we have the typical voltage override capabilities. We have the VRM water block. So I am okay, you get extra power for the PCIe slots. Okay, there is only a 3M.2 slots on the board itself. I don't know anything about onboard audio, so we're just not going to look at that. This is definitely my favorite feature for ASUS motherboards. The thing that annoys me about this is basically it's a very, I think it's like $1 to implement that circuitry in terms of actual components. I can't imagine it would be much more than that in terms of board layout either, because you just have to run like 2 wires over to the Super I/O so that the Super I/O doesn't get horribly inaccurate voltage readings. Yeah, this is a cool feature. The downside is, because of this feature, it's really hard to compare. If people aren't aware that their ASUS motherboard has differential voltage sense, which a lot of people have no idea that their motherboard does that. The awkward thing is, if you try to compare these voltage readings against other motherboards, you're just it doesn't work at all, because this is a more accurate measurement, but it's taken in a completely different location than where you would normally get it on, say, on a standard motherboard, including other ASUS boards, right? Like, cheap ASUS boards don't have the differential sensing functionality, so those will actually measure on the back of the CPU socket, not at the actual CPU. And so you get just totally useless voltage readings as a result. You get voltage readings that aren't useful for comparison between various motherboards. So that's one of the things, is just, and just generally comparing voltage settings between motherboards is is always a pain, but this makes it so much worse. Because this is way different from what you see on any other motherboard. Also, what's a bit unfortunate is that the Super I/O is actually just kind of trash at monitoring voltages. It has 12 millivolts of resolution, so this ultimately is less accurate than if you just have a motherboard that has access to the voltage controller. Now, admittedly, on a lot of motherboards, you don't get access to the voltage controller. So, the nice thing is this always works, because the Super I/O is a widely supported chip, whereas the various voltage controllers aren't. But on the flip side, if you do have access to the voltage controller, that's just kind of better. Anyway, what else do we have here? Not really much of anything, as far as I can tell. So, there's nothing wrong with this board, but it is really, really overpriced, in my opinion. I'm not seeing any value here. If somebody asked me, so why does this cost $800? I couldn't tell them why, because I have no idea. I don't this functionally. So dual X8 PCIe slots, you can get that on a $400 MSI motherboard. 10 gig LAN, Gigabyte puts that on a $470 board. 3 M.2 slots, you can get literally $200 boards with more M.2 slots than this has. The differential sensing thing, that's unique, but that's really not that expensive to implement. Like, actually, ASUS first implemented that on, like, I think the Crosshair 6 or 7 Hero motherboards. And those are, like, a third of the price of this. So, you know, point stands. Like, that does not cost $800 to do. Yeah, I don't know why this board's $800. Like, there's, like, if you decided to spend $800 on this motherboard, good for you, but you could have bought, like, a better cooling system, more storage, better RAM, a better CPU potentially. I guess if you're buying an $800 board, you're already buying a 12900K, but yeah, like, I just mega overpriced motherboards as far as I'm concerned. And I guess I'm just gonna have to take a look on Newegg for the rear I/O because Asus won't provide it on their own website. That's a nice rear I/O, and it has Thunderbolt. That's neat. Yeah. So actually, in terms of feature set, it's mostly comparable to a Gigabyte Z690 Aorus Extreme, which is like a $900 motherboard. But I think the same thing about that board too. That thing is so overpriced. Like, if your motherboard costs more than $500, it needs to do some very special things in order to justify the price. And this doesn't, nor does the Aorus Extreme for that matter. But anyway, so that exists. Then, of course, we have the Maximus Z690 Apex, the only motherboard in the Asus lineup where I am actually kind of okay with the price tag. And I say kind of okay because it is so expensive. But it's such a cool board. And when I say such a cool board, oh yeah, so here you can see the Hyper M.2, Hyper PCIe Gen 5 M.2 card thing that Asus has. But no, the thing that makes this board so cool is the... Can I get like a nice... There we go. Why would you have a zoom function if you're going to have this few pixels on the actual photo? Okay, whatever. So first of all, SP caps for the output filtering of the CPU vCore VRM, which I love that. Like I wanted Asus to put SP caps on their vCore VRM since I figured out basically that SP caps are the best type of capacitor there is when it comes to filtering. Also, these look like the 3-terminal variants, which are even better. They've made the postcode bigger than ever, which I think is neat. There's BCLK up-down buttons, safe boot, you know, like LN2 mode switches, voltage read points, and they're actually like, they're not just solder bumps on the motherboard, they're actual like through holes into the PCB, so your like multimeter probes won't slip out of it, and you could potentially like hook something into them as well very, very easily. So yeah, like voltage read points are really nice. It's got dual BIOS, of course. The VRM is like 24 power stages. It's not a 24 phase, but 24 power stages, 105 amp power stages. The VRM, like, mega overkill. I love the power delivery on this motherboard. I do not love the price tag. But I feel like with what they've done to this Apex, like with all the things that the Apex now has, I can sort of understand why it's $720. I don't know why the formula is $720. The formula doesn't have 3-terminal SP caps. Doesn't have 1 DIMM per channel topology either. It's like, so, you know, that's kind of the thing, but yeah, this board is awesome. Also well, I guess this does drop out on the 10. Like, personally, I don't care about 10 gig LAN, right? Like, this is why I'm such a fan of this motherboard. Is just like, it's got 2.5 gig, a good number of USB ports, PS2 ports, clear CMOS, BIOS flashback, Wi-Fi 6E. I don't even care about the Wi-Fi. I guess there's some M.2 slots somewhere on there, but personally, I couldn't care less. I just want that VRM. Right? And also, you have dual X8 PCIe slots on here, and I'm pretty sure this will have SLI support. So, yeah, I love this board. This is the best board in the ASUS Z690 lineup, and that's all there is to it. Like, this is the best board. Like, yeah, this is pretty much the only ASUS Z690 motherboard that I'm very seriously considering buying, even with the price tag being as insane as it is, because that's just such a cool board. Anyway, up next we've got the Z690M-Plus D4. So this is a nice, well, Nice. It's like for a 12600K, or if you're not hammering a 12700 or a 12900K, it'll still be fine. So yeah, like a decent little MATX motherboard. It's got a 6-layer PCB because that's just standard these days. Do they mention that? It's got a 6-layer PCB either way. They probably are somewhere. I would assume they mention it somewhere, but oh well, doesn't really matter that much. Like good VRM heatsink designs. 10, like the power stage count is a little bit low at just 10, but it shouldn't really make too much of a difference. All right, 10 plus 1, like that can still provide up to like 300 amps is going to be pushing it, but that's where sort of the heatsink comes in, right? And 300, you shouldn't even need 300 amps on even a 12900K. Like even if you don't turn off the E-cores, it's not going to pull 300 amps. So, yeah. Like depending on like so given enough given a decent amount of airflow, this will handle a maxed out 12900K just fine. We've got 3 M.2 slots. The thing that bugs me with this motherboard is there's no troubleshooting LEDs on it. That's like my main complaint for this board is just like, so if it doesn't boot, you're not going to have any idea why it doesn't boot. So yeah, like unlike some of the other low-end ASUS motherboards, this even has like a good number of USB ports, right? Like this is what, 7 Type A's, which, you know, not the most Type A's I've ever seen, but it's not... Like, once we get to down to 6 is when I start getting annoyed, and everything below 6 is like, ugh, no, not okay. But 7, yeah, I'll take, like, I can tolerate 7. So, I rather like this. And this is actually, like, the crazy thing with the ASUS Z690 lineup is just, like, at the very bottom end, it's not actually that bad. And then there's like the apex. And then everything in between, to me at least, seems like it's a little, it ranges between a little bit overpriced and very overpriced, right? Like you have the formula, for example, for an example of very overpriced, there's the formula. For an example of just slightly overpriced, I guess we'll see. We'll see once we get to a board that actually is a good example of that. Anyway, so Prime Z690-A. Man, so this is one of those motherboards that I really wanted to squeeze into my motherboard roundup, but I just couldn't justify it. Because, like, and the reason I wanted to squeeze this in is because it's a very pretty motherboard, right? It does look really, really good. I think this is the best looking motherboard in the entire Z690 lineup from ASUS, but... It's literally got less USB Type-A ports than that $190 MATX board. Like, and I just don't get why. Like, this, you get, on the $190 board, you get this. On the $300 board, you get this. And I guess you get more Type-C ports, but last I checked, like, even my phone's charger doesn't have a freaking Type-C port on both ends. It has one Type-C, and the other end is a Type-A. So, to me, this is kind of like, okay, so we've got 2 completely useless ports on the back of the system. And then, like, especially on the rear I.O., why would you want the Type-C port? Like, I could maybe understand Type-C ports on the case, you know, for the front panel, but on the back of the motherboard? I don't know. Like I've never had like other than my phone, I literally don't have any other Type-C devices. So I don't know. Maybe there is something that you would actually legitimately want to plug into a Type-C port on the back of your system. I have no idea what that is. I've never seen such a device. So you know, like basically, if I had my way, I would replace this Type-A and Type-C port with just another stack of 4 USB ports. That's what I would do. Then obviously we have this gap for the Wi-Fi because there's going to be there's a Wi-Fi version of this motherboard, so that's why there's this gap. Also, seemingly shifted the audio side like up the rear I/O a bit, which isn't really great. Also, this is a $300 motherboard that doesn't have a BIOS flashback function. You do get a power button over there. Actually, wait, no, there's 2 buttons on this, so maybe it does have flashback. There's a power button. Oh no, that's a clear CMOS button. Man, so this is like loaded sort of like test benchy. Yeah, kind of test bench loadout in terms of like functionality, right? Where it's like, oh, you've got your power button, you've got your clear CMOS, and then you've got troubleshooting LEDs up there, right? And the VRM is solid on this. Like, this actually has a really, like, the 16+1 DR MOS, I'm going to assume, like, 50 or 60 amp parts. Not that it really makes too much of a difference. The heat sinks are, you know, substantial. So, thermally, like, this... The thing is, like, 12th gen is actually easier in terms of power demands than 10th and 11th gen. So, like, that's why I'm not that concerned with VRMs on Z690 motherboards. It's just like, guess what? Intel 7 is more power efficient than Intel 14 nanometer plus 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 plus. Imagine that. It pulls less power. The node shrank. So yeah, that's kind of why I'm not so fussed about VRMs on Z690. It's got 4 M.2 slots. Like this, you know, like this almost, like this is the thing for me with this board, is like, it looks good. It's got, you know, 4 M.2 slots. I'm not a fan of where they put that PCIe X4 slot. Like, they put it too close to the main X16. So, like, this is going to be really hard to use. Because, like, your GPU is going to block that almost immediately. But even then, it's just like, that's, you know, I don't think that many people would be looking to use that X4 slot anyway, and you get that bottom X4 slot, you know, at the very bottom of the motherboard, so that's not the end of the world there. But the thing is like, the board is $300. It doesn't have a postcode. It doesn't have a BIOS flashback function. In my opinion, there's not enough USB ports in the back. And really, so it's kind of like functionally, this is very, very similar to the MSI Z690-A motherboard, other than audio, I guess. Yeah, this is on better audio. The thing is, I don't know anything about onboard audio, so I don't rank motherboards by onboard audio, because I've never used onboard audio. Have I? No, I think at one point in time I did. But it's been a long, long time ago that I've used onboard audio. So basically, I don't rank motherboards by onboard audio because I don't use it. And so, yeah, with this board, it's basically, I'm like, the rear I/O is a little bit not, you know, it's not that great in my opinion. The troubleshooting functionality is basic, right? Those LEDs are color coded, but like, as soon as you have any troubleshooting LEDs, I feel like that's enough. I prefer them color coded, but I don't prefer them like $100 worth. Yeah, like, so close. So close. Like, I even really like the power button and the clear CMOS button for test bench use. That's bonus points with me. But like, 6 Type A's on a $300 board? No. And then, yeah, that's kind of most of it. Like, I guess if you don't see anything wrong with the feature set of this motherboard, knock yourself out. But I just feel like, you know, for $300, like, you could save the money and buy that, like, really cheap MSI motherboard, and you wouldn't really, I don't think you'd really notice a difference. Also, I'd say MSI's BIOS is better than ASUS BIOS. Also, this is a DDR5 version, isn't it? Yeah, this is a DDR5 board, which admittedly the DDR5, well, no, that the DDR5 variant of the MSI board without the Wi-Fi is like $240. So you'd still be saving like $60. You can go buy yourself a better memory kit or a better heatsink or whatever, you know, like things that actually make a difference to your performance. So, yeah, but, you know, if you just want to buy a motherboard for looks and you buy that one, I can totally understand it. I can totally understand that. But the feature set there is just, for $300, a little bit slim, in my opinion. And I know I'm being nitpicky, but the thing is, there's just not that much difference between motherboards. Right? Like, at the end of the day, a motherboard, all it really does is it powers your CPU and connects it to a bunch of other things. And there's also a BIOS if you do a lot of overclocking. I don't really know what else you do in the BIOS. The only time I go into the BIOS is to configure, like, boot options and then overclocking. So, yeah. Anyway, ASUS Z690, this thing, right. So 14+1 power stages. So this is actually like similar VRM to what you get on the MSI board, but, and you know what, I should probably pull up that MSI board if I'm going to keep referencing it. That would be a pretty sensible decision, wouldn't it? Because I really do like using that Z690-A board from MSI as a sort of baseline. because it really does sort of offer all the basic functionality that Z690 can offer, right? Like from here on out, it's like, oh, you can have more PCIe slots that are directly connected to the CPU. You can have Thunderbolt and 10 gig, and that Wi-Fi. That actually comes with Wi-Fi as well, right? You can have better power delivery. Well, you can have more substantial VRMs that'll run slightly cooler. Not that it really matters, unless you're absolutely hammering the CPU. Actually, no. Even if you're hammering the CPU, it's just a matter of like how little airflow does your system have? Right? So anyway, so this board from ASUS, that is, I believe, a $200-ish motherboard, right? What did I click on? This is the Z690 just dash P, plain dash P. Okay, so there's a Wi-Fi version, which this is the just dash P. Yeah, DDR5 and no Wi-Fi, no anything, nothing like that. Okay, so yeah, so this costs basically the same as that MSI board, but it doesn't have troubleshooting LEDs. There's no troubleshooting LEDs on there. You've got less M.2 slots. You do get more PC. I think it even has less SATA ports. Am I blind? Yeah, it's got less SATA ports, right? You only get 4 instead of 6. Yeah. So basically, you pay the same amount of money for a motherboard with less everything, including just 5 USB Type A's. And I've mentioned earlier, less than 6, and nope. Just no. Like, you might only have a keyboard and a mouse, but I think less than 6 USB Type A ports on the back of a motherboard is just totally unacceptable. It's an ATX motherboard. There's no shortage of space here. There should be more USB ports. Okay, that's all there is to it, in my opinion. And I'm aware that you get internal USB headers, but it's like I max out all of my rear ones, and then I also use some of the internal ones. So, yeah. And then there's no troubleshooting LEDs. There's no BIOS flashback function, which I'm pretty sure the MSI board does have. Yes, it does. See? So yeah, this board is just like, again, it's not a bad motherboard, right? I don't think you're gonna, like, if you buy this board, it's gonna die on you or something. It's just like it does less stuff and it costs the same as an MSI board. And I personally prefer the MSI BIOS. I think MSI's BIOS is by far the easiest to work with. Or, yeah, quickest, easiest to navigate, best organized, like, whatever way you want to put it. MSI BIOS is the BIOS where it's like, even if I haven't used an MSI motherboard in a while, I don't get into an MSI motherboard, like MSI, I don't go from using some other vendor to using an MSI board and feel like I'm totally lost, which is a very real problem when going from like Gigabyte to ASUS or ASUS to ASRock or ASRock to Gigabyte. Like any ASRock, Gigabyte, and ASUS, they have just BIOSes that are basically, you have to be used to them in order for them to make sense, as far as I'm concerned. ASUS in the sense that they hide a bunch of stuff that, like, I want access to. Gigabyte in that their BIOS is just a maze. It's not that they're intentionally hiding things. It's just stuff is everywhere for no apparent reason. ASRock's BIOS is actively hostile to the user as far as I'm concerned. It depends which specific motherboard you're looking at, but that's another problem, is like some ASRock motherboard BIOSes are absolutely freaking atrocious. So yeah, whereas MSI BIOS is very consistent, everything is always in basically the same place. You know, you have a CPU menu with CPU settings, you have like voltage, like, yeah, so MSI BIOS is best organized, least annoying, least confusing. I just wish they were better about including VTT DDR control on their DDR4 motherboards, which admittedly is a function that ASUS regularly doesn't have in their BIOSes either. That only, like, it only seems like, I think it's only like ASRock and Gigabyte that very consistently include VTT DDR controls in their BIOSes. So, yeah, I don't like any BIOSes that much. It's like, I'm just used to the Gigabyte one the most. Anyway, so yeah, that's kind of the thing, is just like that, the Dash P is just like, it's not a bad motherboard. If you prefer ASUS BIOS to MSI BIOS, knock yourself out, but as far as I'm concerned, it does less stuff, it costs the same, I don't like it. Anyway, next up we've got the ProArt Z690 Creator Wi-Fi. I don't think there's a price for that up yet on Newegg. Might have to look that one up. I think I've seen it in the UK though, so... Where's the name? Ah, there's the name. Oh no. Actually, let's go... Oh, nope. So it's probably going to be around $400, which is I'd say, yeah, if I remember correctly, the feature set, that's a reasonable price. Yep. So you've got 6 USB Type-A ports, which here it's a case of they just ran out of space, right? You've got 10 gig LAN, 2.5 gig LAN, you've got Thunderbolt, you've got the display inputs. What's really cool is they have both display inputs, because, so compared to, say, the Gigabyte Z690 Aero D, which is the only other Thunderbolt, well, no, ASRock has a Thunderbolt board as well, and MSI has like a $600 motherboard with Thunderbolt, which I think is ridiculous. And anyway, so the Aero D gives you one DisplayPort input, which means you only get one Type-C port, one Thunderbolt port with display pass-through, if I understand it correctly. With this right here, you get both ports will do display pass-through, because you get two DisplayPort inputs. So that's kind of neat. Actually, could be a major advantage if that's something you need. You get BIOS flashback on this motherboard, Wi-Fi 6E, of course. The main annoyance I have with this board is there's no postcode, which I don't get it. This is a like $400-ish motherboard. You could put a postcode on this. Like, I don't see any reason why you wouldn't want a postcode on this, right? And the funny thing is, in the past, when ASUS didn't use the ProArt stuff, like when the ProArt branding wasn't yet a thing, when it was the WS branding, the WS boards always had a postcode. Like, why doesn't this have a postcode? Every single workstation, like Asus WS board that, I think maybe the X58 didn't have a postcode or something, but like Z680WS has a postcode, Z77WS has a postcode, X79WS has a postcode. Like, we can go on and on and on, all the way up until like Z490WS. Those all have postcodes. And then there's this thing, and it's just like, where postcode? No postcode readout. So I'm really annoyed about that. But other than that, like, but you know, like, I guess if you don't care, like, no, postcodes are very useful. This should have a postcode. I am not going to just drop that. They even have blank space down there. They could have, like, honestly, you know what I don't get is, like, there's this obsession with motherboard vendors on the high-end boards to put, like, OLED screens and shit in their rear I/O and stuff. Is like, why don't you just, like, since you have all this plastic over here, just, like, integrate a postcode into it or something. You know, just integrate a postcode into that and just have a little header on the motherboard that it plugs into. Because, yeah, this is, like, a really, like, all the other motherboards in this price range have a postcode from, like, the other well, yeah, from the other manufacturers at this price point, you get a postcode. It's just Asus where it's like, nope, you don't get a postcode yet. Which, yeah, I just, that's super weird in my opinion. Super, super weird. I'm assuming they did it so to force people to buy the Z690-E board. Because otherwise, like, if this had a postcode, I would recommend this over a -E. And I'm entirely serious about that. Postcodes are freaking useful. It's really that simple. Anyway, you do get troubleshooting LEDs that are color-coded, but they're, like, this is just not as detailed as having an actual postcode, right? You do get dual X8 PCIe slots, 4 M.2 slots as well, 8 SATA ports, which is actually kind of a lot for a Z690 board. There's not many that go all the way up to 8 SATA ports. So, yeah, you know, an interesting mix of connectivity. I guess I could have included this in my motherboard roundup. It's just, I'm so annoyed by the lack of a postcode. Like, seriously. There is no postcode. I am, like, at this price point, that's offensive. It's way too damn expensive to not have a postcode. I'm assuming, yeah, you got X8, X8. Imagine that. That's cool. Like, that's a really cool, like, that's just a cool function to have, as far as I'm concerned. So, yeah, I rather, like, just why no postcode? I know I'm repeating myself, but it's like, that is one of those things that I do care about a lot. Anyway, the VRM we don't have to be too worried about, right? Yeah, 16 plus 1, 70 amp smart power stages. So, actually, I don't know that they're smart, but there's 17... the 17 amp power stages, be they DR MOS or not, like, you know, DR MOS or smart power stage, doesn't really matter. This will power anything you can put into the socket. Again, 12th gen just doesn't pull as much power as 11th gen did, which is still weird to think about because 11th gen had less cores and was slow. Anyway, oh, we got to the Z690E. Yes. So this... Oh, right, this is the motherboard with that really stupid M.2 slot. Yeah, so this is the one. So this is the one where we're going to pull up the manual because manuals are good. I wonder if they mention that here or if that's in the block diagram. Somewhere. You know what? No, we're going to do it through... So yeah, you get, see this? Like you get Gen 5, X16, then you get Gen 3 and Gen 4. You don't get dual X8. And this is a $470 motherboard, if I remember correctly. This is the same price as a Z690 or a Master. Now, admittedly, the Master also doesn't give you dual X8. And it is something I'm kind of annoyed about with the Master, but at the same price range, you can also get like the Aero D from Gigabyte. So I'm like, oh, it's not really something I'd want to forgive them, but it's like, oh, you get 10 gig and, you know, yeah. Like, there's other features to compensate for that, I feel like, kind of, maybe. Like, yeah, well, the thing is, the Aero D also has 10 gig, so, I don't know. Where is the Dash E? Oh, it's here. Oh. Yeah, I was looking for a motherboard that's $470, not for a motherboard that's almost $600. Please don't buy it for $600. Right? Like, don't screw yourself over like that. That's really dumb. Yeah, so... Wait, is this not the... Oh no, that's the PCIe. There should be a table somewhere with what the M.2 slots do here. Because I'm pretty sure this is the board with the Gen 5 M.2 slot. Yeah. Did I seriously just scroll past it? Or was it only the ASRock board that did that? Oh no, it's right there. When the first M.2 slot is occupied with an SSD, your GPU slot gets cut down to X8. This admittedly will not make your current GPU run appreciably slower. Even if you have a 3090 PCIe 4.0 X8 is perfectly fine. But like, I just don't like. I feel like they should have just given you an X8 slot instead, or yeah, like they should have just given you another X8 slot and then added included a adapter card, which they even included a ROG Hyper M.2 card apparently. Right? Or is that only on the... Wait, did they include it? I don't think they... Accessories. Yeah, you get an M.2 card with it. Like, what is wrong with you? You include an M.2 card, and you don't put an X8 Gen 5 PC... Like, an extra Gen 5 PCIe slot on the board. Instead, you put an M.2 Gen 5 slot on the board. Like, why would you do that? Like, you included the freaking M.2 card with it anyway. You could have had like 4 PCIe Gen 4 drives connected directly to the board, and then a Gen 5 on the stupid adapter card. And actually, I don't think the adapter cards are stupid. I think they're good. But, like, this is stupid to include an adapter card if you're not going to give us a, like a Gen 5 slot to use it in. I don't know that they're including a Gen 5 adapter card, but at this price point, they could have. They definitely could have. Because it's not like the other functionality that you get with this board is all that amazing. Because, you do get a lot of USB ports, which I'm a fan of, but you only get like 2.5 gig Intel LAN, which you literally get at like, that's a standard feature of every Z690 motherboard above $200, is to have 2.5 gig Intel LAN. So except I think there's a couple gigabyte boards that might violate that rule, but yeah, like, eh. So I don't like this board very much. Actually, I don't like this board is an understatement. I really dislike this motherboard because it combines one of my favorite features with one of the worst things a motherboard could do, in my opinion, ever, which is stealing PCIe lanes from the GPU to convert them into an M.2 slot. I hate it on B550 motherboards, I hate it on X570 motherboards, and I also hate it on Z690 motherboards. Like, one of the main reasons I don't use the B550 Unify more is because it's because it doesn't have enough PCIe slots. Right? Which admittedly, well, actually no, even this doesn't have enough PCIe slots because you have X4s, and X4 PCIe slots aren't good enough, for some things. So, yeah. And you're still dropping that primary slot to X8. So you could have had it drop to X8 and given us another X8 instead of, drop it to X8 and convert it to an M.2 slot. So yeah, I just think this is a really dumb thing to do with PCIe lanes. And the annoying thing is this is the cheapest motherboard that ASUS has with a postcode, which is just infuriating. It's so you get this really dumb design decision, and then also one of the best features for overclocking you can get. This is why I'm serious. I'm 99% certain that the reason the ProArt doesn't have a postcode is so that they can sell more -E's, because this is such a dumb motherboard. This is a cool board. I mean, I don't even have a use for the 10 gig, but if this had a postcode, I would literally recommend this over this. And actually, I think you could buy a postcode card for less than the price difference between these two boards. So this might still be a better purchase, even if you have to add the postcode yourself. But this board is just don't do this. Just don't do this. I do not like that. It's also too expensive. So yeah, I really, really don't like the -E. Anyway, then we have another variant of the -P, another variant of the -P. I think I've made my thoughts very clear on that board, and we get the TUF. And the TUF, I'm kind of and this is another one of those boards where it's okay, so, internally we got 4 M.2 slots, great. We got only 4 SATA ports, which is kind of okay, whatever. SATA ports aren't that popular these days. That's not the end of the world. We've got our color-coded troubleshooting LEDs. We've got some serious VRM heatsinks and a proper VRM under them. And we also get 6 USB ports. 6 Type A's. And the worst part is this is a 2-stack. Right? They could have very easily put a 4-stack right there. And no. 2 ports on their own. With this board, it's they fit the Wi-Fi, they fit their 2 USB. Why do motherboard manufacturers hate putting USB ports in the rear I/O? And the crazy thing is, if you look at the ProArt just ran out of space, so I can understand why the ProArt has 6. And then you look at the -E, right? And the -E is loaded with USB ports. So it's not like ASUS doesn't get it. It's just ASUS is trying to rip you off. Oh, you want USB ports? That'll be $500, please. Oh, you want a postcode? $500, please. Could you not? And also, I can't get it to show the rear I/O. Yeah, see? They do know how to cram USB ports in the rear I/O when they want to. It's just that they won't do it on a motherboard that's less than, $400. Now that yeah. They won't do it on a board that's less than $400, which is just completely ridiculous. Actually, I guess maybe the Dash F has a decent number of USB ports. We'll get to that board. But yeah, so the TUF is basically like, you know, and the crazy, like the other annoying thing is like this isn't really that much of a like upgrade over the MSI board. I guess you get better audio again. Actually, they don't mention what audio chip this has, so you might not even get better audio. It's a 6-layer PCB, of course. They do not mention what what chip that is. So this may very well be on that same audio. Yeah, they do not mention what chip it is. Whereas MSI does. Like, no, specs. Yeah, Realtek ALC 897. And let's see if I can figure out what the TUF has. Because the ASUS website won't tell me, which makes me suspect it's the same chip. Also, this board is $290, and that's from Newegg. That's not like, you know, it's not getting marked up by anybody. Yeah. Does this do 7.1 channels? This does do 7.1 channels. I really wonder what audio chip is on there. I wonder why ASUS won't tell me. You know? Like, I'm pretty sure they mention it on their other boards, right? Like, they mention it on this one. I bet you they mention it on this one. Yep. Yeah, they do. ALC 4080. That sounds... I don't know anything about onboard audio, but that certainly sounds like a better chip than an ALC 897, whatever MSI is using. So I can only assume that the reason why they don't mention what chip this has is because it's probably the same as what other motherboards in this price range use. Or it might even be worse, which is why they won't talk about it. And of course it's covered up, so you can't even check the part number. Oh man. I mean, to be fair, like the audio cover thing is like that's standard. That's been a thing on motherboards for ages and ages and ages. But it's just like, yeah, so it's covered up, and we also won't tell you what it is because you actually just don't want to know, you know? It's great audio, trust us, but we won't tell you what it actually is. Like they might have a better audio implementation than the MSI board, even if they do use the same chip. I'm just kind of annoyed that they won't give me that info. Like they won't say what chip it is because it's like what good reason is there to hide this information from me, or to hide this information from people in general, right? Like, if somebody wants to know what audio chip their motherboard comes with, they should be able to find out what audio chip their motherboard comes with. That's one of the reasons why I do my VRM, you know, like why I do PCB breakdowns where we talk about the VRM is because back when before I started running AHOC, I was really annoyed that you just couldn't get details on what the freaking power delivery on a motherboard was other than it's got a lot of phases. And a lot of the time, the motherboard didn't even have half as many phases as the box said it has. So that like you were, you know, and it's like, so they'd tell you that it has a fake phase count. They wouldn't tell you what actual components it uses. And, you know, good luck, have fun. Just like, and I actually care about, like, I care a lot more about VRMs than I care about audio. So eventually, like, thanks to AHOC, now you know, I just kind of go like, yep, this board uses these power stages, but yeah, anyway. So I'm annoyed that they won't tell us what audio, like what audio chip is on there. That, like, just, I don't even rate boards by audio, so there's no reason to hide this from me, because I wouldn't care. Like, again, I have no idea, like, about onboard audio. It's just kind of weird that they're hiding it. Anyway, yeah, you do get color-coded troubleshooting LEDs, but the thing is, like, you know, this MSI board, which is way cheaper, also has troubleshooting LEDs, and more USB ports, and BIOS flashback, which I don't believe this has BIOS flashback, does it? Yeah, no. I guess you do get 2 Type-C ports on the back, but again, like I mentioned, I have no idea what device you would plug into the back of your system that uses a Type-C port, so I don't know. I don't see that as a upside in any way, shape, or form. So that's the TUF. Again, if you want to buy this board, there's nothing wrong with it. It's just like I think it's kind of overpriced. It doesn't really do anything. Like, yeah, I don't see $40 worth of value there, because that's basically what it is, right? Like, yeah, it's like $40 worth. Like, does that motherboard make my life $40 better? And I'd say no. I don't see how it makes my life $40 better. If they put a postcode on it, I'd say sure. Easiest way to get my approval, just slap a postcode on it. You could probably ship a motherboard with just 2 USB ports that way, if it was cheap enough. Anyways, Z690-I Gaming. So the reason I decided to stop doing, like why I didn't cover ITX motherboards in my roundup is very simple. I don't actually build ITX systems. I couldn't care less about how big a motherboard is. Right. In fact, there's quite a few motherboards in my collection which I have specifically because they're ridiculously huge. Like XL-ATX motherboards that I have because they're XL-ATX, not because they're particularly amazing or anything. It's just like, so yes, I like big motherboards with excessive amounts of basically everything, like PCIe slots. Usually, when you get an XL-ATX motherboard, they have excessive amounts of PCIe slots, because that's like the main reason to make a motherboard taller is to get more PCIe slots on it. So you can understand, like, so I've just kind of decided I'm not covering ITX anymore, because it's like I don't get the like ITX build stuff. Like I don't do ITX builds. I don't do low profile coolers. I don't have an appreciation for small systems because they sound like an absolute pain to build in. And so, I feel like me trying to judge if an ITX board is properly designed for an ITX system is dumb because I've never built an ITX system. Or at least I've not actually no, I have built an ITX system, but it was in the biggest ITX case that was available. So I still don't count that because it was basically like, in fact, it was the Bit Phoenix Prodigy, and eventually they made an MATX version of that case because of how freaking huge it was. Where they didn't change the overall size, they just changed how the insides were organized, and you could suddenly fit an MATX motherboard in it. So yeah, I'm not really big on the whole small form factor thing. They did cram an awful lot of USB ports onto this for an ITX board. They even got clear CMOS and BIOS flashback on there, which is cool. Wi-Fi 6E, Thunderbolt by the looks of it. Yeah, Thunderbolt 4. Like, it is an expensive ITX motherboard, but, ITX boards are generally expensive, just because they're very small. And then they also have, like, all of the stacked PCBs for just getting more stuff onto the board. I guess one of them is like audio and M.2 card, and the other one is maybe just M.2. So yeah, the thing is like I don't see anything fundamentally wrong with this motherboard, but at the same time, it's just kind of like I also don't care that much. It does have troubleshooting LEDs, which is nice. Like, see, that's the kind of thing I appreciate. It's just like, how hard is it going to be to overclock RAM on this? Not how hard is it going to be to build a system around it, because I'm never going to build an ITX system. Oh, damn, they actually have like a really nice picture of this board. I wonder how good the transient response of this VRM is, because this is all tiny little tantalum polymer capacitors, and these little tantalum polymers, like, I've considered using them for cap modding in the past because the ESL of them is ridiculously low. Like, they are well into the territory of multi-layer ceramics. Compared to like the regular SP cap type capacitors that they have for the memory power. But yeah, so it's a very expensive ITX board, but I don't like, if you do ITX builds, I don't know. Like, I guess if I was doing an ITX build, I'd strongly consider this for sure. At the same time, I'm not sure, like with the heat sinks, there might be, cool, like, clearance issues, maybe. I don't know. So yeah, cool board. This is a cool board. ASUS is so far doing a lot better than ASRock. When I did the ASRock motherboard roundup, that was just basically constant complaints. Okay, we've got another TUF, which again, just somewhat overpriced. Then we've got the Z690-G. And this is a $350 motherboard with no postcode, which again, I've said before, like offensive. You can't have a motherboard this expensive without a postcode, but oh, like the Asus is lucky that they don't have any competition in this price range, or more like in the like premium MATX motherboard area, because yeah, MATX is just ignored by all the other manufacturers. So, yeah, I mean, this made it into the roundup because literally this is the best MATX motherboard you can get. 14 power stages, big heat sinks, 8-layer PCB on this, which is cool. Not that it seems to have any impact on the memory overclocking. The QVL for this board is worse than for like some of the 6-layer boards from Asus, so it makes me kind of suspicious that the memory topology on this might be unique to this board and not that great. Yeah, maybe they just haven't bothered to fully update their QVL, right? Like, because, yeah, if we look at the Strix E, right, this is QVL to 6400. And actually, I think this is probably an 8-layer. But there's, but even then, it's like, it's also got 8 layers, so it should have, like, the, you know, so it could use the same topology. Because you assume, like, obviously there's space constraints, right? MATX motherboard, there's less space to put things places, so you need extra layers just to get the same level of functionality. But what I'm trying to say is that, you know, other than the space constraints, it wouldn't be impossible to put this memory topology into a 8-layer MATX motherboard. Assuming this is even 8 layers, I can't find a layer count indicator. This is so weird. Like, on some motherboards, they're like, oh yeah, this has 6 layers, when it's like, you know, a standard thing to have on that price range of motherboard. Maybe I've... Why is the website broken? Let's reload it, see if that fixes it. Nope, did not fix that. Okay, that's great. Uh-huh. Nothing works. Lovely. Yep, none of that works. Oh, well, that's annoying, isn't it? Let's see if I can find a different board from them where they do mention the layer count. So, okay, this one works. Wait, VRM. Okay, they don't mention the layer. Wait, power design. Teamed phases. 6-layer PCB, right? And let's check what that memory spec is. Oh, wait, this is DDR4. Well, that didn't work out as the way I hoped. Okay, so now we have a dash F, which, if I'm not mistaken, this is also 6 layers. So it's under the power design thing. Man, I hate overly animated websites. Okay, 6 layers. Now, what does this do for memory speeds? 6400. This has an 8-layer PCB, right? 8-layer. And the spec is 6000. And when you see something like this with a motherboard, that normally means it's got a snowflake memory topology that they're not going to optimize properly. Yeah. Like, this is one of those things, is like, if a motherboard has a suspiciously, like, if you've got more layers and a worse QVL or just a worse spec sheet, that normally means that, like there's two options here. Either they've not updated the spec sheet for this motherboard in a while, or it has a very different memory topology from all the other motherboards, and the optimizations they're doing on the 6-layer PCBs don't work on this PCB, and so this is going to be like, this is going to need, like, you know, specific support from Asus to get better memory overclocking. So, yeah. Like, that doesn't mean the topology is necessarily bad, it's just that it might need more work to hit the same kind of results as some of the other topologies that Asus has. So, Yeah, that's the reason I say that's why I don't pay that much attention to layer count. Is just like, just because you got more layers doesn't mean they're being used to actually add any extra, like, for benefits. Um, but yeah, like the thing is, this is the only high-end MATX motherboard there is. At least it's not terrible, other than the lack of a postcode, right? Like decent number of USB ports, 2.5 gig LAN, Wi-Fi 6, clear CMOS, BIOS flashback. But I really wish it actually had a postcode. Um, and then I'm also really suspicious about the memory speed. Like that is just like, yeah, I am not sure what's going on with that. Other than that, I also want to say this chipset heatsink, like this graphic on there, like it's weird. Like I don't mind what I like. Honestly, I'd say Asus motherboards these days look pretty rice, if from like cars. But I have no idea what's going on over there. This just it's just weird. Like I don't mind the whole like sticker bombed look on a motherboard, but that right there is just like I don't like this is just ugly in my opinion. Like that's the kind of thing that I'd get like black electrical tape and cover it up. Um so yeah, anyway, but the like the Dash G, that is one of the other motherboards that I've been kind of like, oh, you know what? I would be maybe interested in trying that board out just because it is an MATX motherboard and it's a kind of a neglected form factor, but these days. But the thing is, when I realized that like when I saw like that actually was a thing for me when I was considering that board, was like, oh, maybe I could buy that instead of a Apex just for some, just to get some ASUS testing done because I only get Gigabyte and like MSI boards, so I wanted an ASUS motherboard for comparison, and the Dash G did catch my eye, and then I saw the tech specs for the memory, and I was like, yeah, how about no? Right? Like, it's like, oh, it's got an 8-layer PCB, and then I realized, wait a minute, the memory speed support seems a bit low. And like that, I lost interest. Anyway. But, if you're looking for an MATX motherboard, you're not going to find a better option. And the extra layers do help with, like, VRM heat dissipation and that kind of thing. So, there's, like, it's not all, like, it's not that it doesn't make any difference. It's just that, like, the memory overclocking on that board just, like, I don't know. Maybe they're just behind on updating the website. That would be best if they're just behind on updating the spec sheet. But somehow I kind of suspect that maybe that board is just kind of worse at memory overclocking for one reason or another. And if I had to guess, and if it is, then the only reason I can think of is just it's got its special snowflake topology that's different from everything else in the Asus motherboard lineup, and so consequently it isn't as optimized as the other boards are. Anyway, Dash A. So this is another white motherboard, and I gotta say, I think the Z690, the Prime board, looks better, right? Like this, like I said, this is just super tacky. It's not as bad as what they have on the Dash G on the chipset, but it's a bit much, a bit of a visual mess, if you will. But 16+1, this looks like basically the same motherboard as the Z690. Oh, this is where the USB ports went. Of course. Why didn't it hit me earlier? See, this is where all the... Actually, wait, that's not that many, is it? This is 8. Yeah, this is where all the USB ports from that Prime Dash A went. This is where they went. Wait. Oh no, they do have 2 Type-Cs. But you don't get an optical out for audio, so if you use an optical audio interface, then yeah, you're screwed on that. You do get clear CMOS, BIOS flashback, troubleshooting LEDs instead of a postcode. This board is $400, isn't it? Oh, no, it isn't. It's $350. What an improvement. So you could get a $330 Gigabyte board with a postcode and DDR5 support. And a similar number of USB ports. Actually, probably more USB ports, but yeah, it's, like the USB ports are past a certain point. I consider those also a relatively minor thing. Like, right, everything has diminishing returns. I don't feel like every motherboard needs to have 12 USB ports, but 6 or less is kind of pushing it, unless you run out of space. So ITX boards get a pass, and motherboards with like Thunderbolt and 10 gig and 2.5 gig and DisplayPort inputs, you know, yeah, those get a pass. Everything else doesn't. Anyway, so the Dash A, I just feel like that's expensive. What does it even add over the regular Dash A? I mean, other than the USB ports that they took away. Right? Because I think the VRM is the same. Or, yeah, it is the same. Right? Yeah, 16 plus 1, 16 plus 1. 4 DIMM slots, DDR... Oh, wait, this is a DDR4 motherboard, right? So this is their high-end DDR4 motherboard with no postcode. Like, seriously? Also, you get X16, X4, you get 4 M.2 slots, which at this price range is kind of normal, I think. VRM heatsinks look fine. Honestly, with 16 power stages under them, like it'll be fine. Optimen. Wait, do they have that typo everywhere? I want to know. I don't think, like, I wonder how many different motherboard pages they have that typo on. VRM heatsink, multiple temperature. Do you notice how ASUS just doesn't, like, multiple temperature sources? Okay, so you monitor the PCIe slot, the battery for some reason. Oh no, there's like an optional temperature sensor header down there. Okay, so you've got temperature sensors by the PCIe slot, one in the CPU socket. What about the VRM guys? You know, like, I'm not saying this motherboard would actually overheat. I really don't think it will. But why would you not put a temperature sensor in the VRM? You know, that's like one of the hottest like that's one of the parts of a motherboard that has a tendency to actually get hot. You know, the good place to put a temperature sensor, in my opinion. You could also put a temperature sensor somewhere near the chipset. You know, that also tends to you know, you might sometimes want to be able to check the temperature of the chipset as well. Yeah, but you know, this is ASUS, so this motherboard does not have. Oh, it does. It has Optimem. Well, that sucks. I prefer Optimen. Anyway, what else do we have here? Okay, so this is again just kind of like, it's not a bad board. I just feel like at $350, it's kind of light on the functionality. Right? Like, yeah, at $350, it is very much kind of like it's light on the functionality. There's not really any other way to put it, in my opinion. What other motherboards? Didn't the Crosshair 8 Hero, when it first, like the original Crosshair 8 Hero was like $350? Admittedly, that didn't have PCIe Gen 5, but it had a bunch of extra extreme overclocking features that this motherboard doesn't have. Oh, I guess that's sort of where the price difference comes from, I guess. It's like, no, if we included those overclocking features, it would have been $400. Except that's not even the case, because you don't get those overclocking features until you get up to the Z690-E, which is $470. Like, ASUS basically took their motherboard lineup and added plus 50% across the board and called it a day. That's what it feels like looking at their Z690 lineup. So anyway, yeah, the Dash A, the Dash A is just kind of like it's just more of the same. Like, there's nothing fundamentally wrong with it. It's just a kind of overpriced motherboard. Dash F. Let's have a look. So this is DDR5 instead of DDR4. And that costs... What does it cost? $400. Okay, so this is going up against, I'd say, very hard competition. Because at $400, you can get the MSI Carbon. And the MSI Carbon has a lot of connectors. So many connectors. And a postcode. This, because it's an ASUS motherboard, of course, does not have a postcode, because why would you want to know why your system doesn't turn on? Right? Same rear eye, actually, maybe slightly. Oh, the optical output made a return. How, like, this is the thing, like, ASUS motherboards have features that just come and go at random, right? Like, you don't get this, like, nice linear progression of functionality in the ASUS product stack. You get random features just disappearing for reasons nobody, actually, the ASUS pricing department can explain exactly why that feature is missing from that very specific motherboard. But, like, it's annoying. It's really annoying, right? So, okay, we've got 2 Type-Cs, we've got the clear CMOS, the BIOS flashback, we've got a good number of USB ports. Like, yeah, nice feature set, except, like, this is like, we're up at $400. I still don't have my postcode. We don't have dual X8 PCIe slots, right, which the MSI Z690 Carbon has. This has 4 M.2 slots in total. Guess what the Carbon has? It has 5. Yeah, the Carbon has 5 M.2 slots. Cost the same, too. Also has a postcode. Did I mention it has a postcode? This doesn't have a freaking postcode. I am very annoyed with just, boards like this, where it's just like, why? Like, and I bet you it's still on a 6-layer PCB as well. Whereas the Carbon is on an 8. Actually, we checked this motherboard, didn't we? Yes, it is on a 6-layer PCB. The Carbon's on an 8-layer PCB. Not that that fundamentally means that the Carbon is a better motherboard, but 8-layer PCBs cost more than 6-layer PCBs do. So basically what I'm trying to say here is that this motherboard is $400 because ASUS wants more money, not because the board is worth $400. Like, at $300... Yeah, at $300, I think this would be a great board. At $350, I'd be no. At $350, I think it's a bit much because there's the Aorus Pro, which has a postcode. But at $400, I feel like I feel like if I bought this, I'd feel ripped off. I'd feel very ripped off because that's what this is. This is a ripoff. You've got no more functionality than you've got worse functionality than a $400 MSI board. You've got actually comparable functionality to like a $330 Gigabyte board. Like, Asus is lucky that ASRock hasn't. Actually, ASRock has basically looked at, like, ASRock seemingly took inspiration from Asus when it comes to their Z690 motherboard lineup, because like the ASRock Z690 motherboard lineup is horrendous. So honestly, as annoyed as I am with the Dash F, like, compared to what ASRock has done with their lineup, this is still not that bad, but $400 for a motherboard with no postcode, no PCIe splitting, like no PCIe lane switching, just 4 M.2 slots, which is like literally even the cheapest, like one of the cheapest MSI motherboards does that. You've got your 6 SATA ports, which is standard for Z690. You've got a VRM that, like, you can get a comparable VRM at the $300 mark. I guess you get a clear CMOS button? Actually, no, at $400, no. Like, this is just bad. This is so overpriced. This is $100 too much for this motherboard. Because, yeah, like, no, it's like $100 too much. Unless the, like, PCIe slot release thing that Asus implemented, unless that costs like $50, this is overpriced. Very overpriced. Anyway, let's move on to the next board. Oh, look, it's the Z690 Extreme. I think this one's... Wait, is this the one? Oh, this is the other motherboard with the dumb PCIe layout and PCIe lane assignment. Which is even worse in my opinion, because this board is $1,100, and they still couldn't figure out how to assign the PCIe lanes properly. Yep, $1,100. And they couldn't figure out how to assign the PCIe lanes properly. Also, it has worse capacitors than the Apex. So, like, and after they put those, the Apex has the good capacitors. The Apex is $700. Why does the $1,100 motherboard have worse capacitors than the Apex? Now, technically, these do have like higher lifetime endurance, like lifetime specs, but I'd rather have these. If you're somebody who buys $1,100 motherboards, I assume you also buy a new system like every 2 years because money evidently has no meaning to you. So, um, like, so you get the cheap capacitors instead of the expensive capacitors. But hey, it's an $1,100 ASUS motherboard. What did you expect? You do get all of the same overclocking features that the Apex has, except you get too many DIMM slots. So your memory overclocking is going to suck because you've got too many DIMM slots. You get the DIMM.2 thing, which you got on the Apex as well, so that's not really a huge advantage right there. You get an OLED screen because you don't have a monitor. Why would you look at, like, I'm assuming if you buy an $1,100 motherboard, you probably have like a 4K monitor or some really fancy ultra wide. Instead of looking at that, look at your motherboard. Like, I don't get these boards. Once we go over $500, it's just like the board needs to be like made of solid gold and not cost more than the gold on it is worth. Or like, yeah, okay, we've got the differential sensing again, but Asus implemented that on even like far cheaper motherboards in the past. Like, that's the kind of feature, like, I feel like if Asus, if they shove the differential sensing on like their entire lineup, which they totally could, this costs nothing to implement as far as I'm aware. It would make it like a really cool, unique feature that you get with all Asus motherboards. But instead, it's just like, no. If you pay Asus way too much money, they will kindly give you slightly like more accurate voltage readings. And even then, they just feed them into the stupid Super I/O chip anyway, which doesn't have that much voltage accuracy. Oh, but you do get the little oscilloscope dongle, which, from what I can tell, they have a lot of smoothing on that waveform. I wonder what this looks like when it's running LinPack. Because that does not look anything like LinPack in my experience. Memory. Actually, what do they spec this for? I'm assuming it's like 6600 because all of the other boards are 64. Oh no, this has the same memory spec as like the 6-layer PCB boards. So that's fun. Like, don't buy it. Like, it's really simple. Just do not buy this motherboard. It's way overpriced. Like, you can build a whole system for the price of this motherboard. You could buy two motherboards for the price. You could buy a motherboard, memory, and CPU for the price of this board. You could buy it's just, this board isn't, like, it doesn't make any sense. And also, it does that stupid thing with the PCIe lanes again, right? Because you get 5 M.2 slots, but M.2 like M.2_1 supports PCIe 5.0 X4 mode. And if we get to down here, shares bandwidth with our GPU slot. Oh, you don't say! It's almost like the CPU only has 16 PCIe Gen 5 lanes, and you're wasting them on M.2 drives. Like, the thing that's really dumb about this is that MSI's, and we are going to pull up the Carbon for this, because here's the thing. So the $400 Carbon, right? The Carbon gives you a PCIe 4.0 right off the CPU, then 3 more PCIe 4.0s off of the chipset, and then a PCIe 3.0 off of the chipset for the M.2 slots, right? So you got 5 M.2 slots on the motherboard itself, and then you got X8 and X8 on the PCIe slots. Guess what you can do with that? You can put an M.2 drive into that last X8 slot. So on this motherboard, if you get a like X8 to X4 M.2 adapter card, or just an X4 M.2 adapter card for the bottom PCIe slot, you get 6 M.2 drives. If you try to do that with the Extreme, well, you can't, because the motherboard steals those lanes before you get your adapter card. Also, I'm pretty sure this comes with another M.2 adapter card, doesn't it? Which is just so dumb. Scroll down to the accessories. Oh man, scrolling on their website is painful. So you get a bunch of splitters, fan controller, dim.2, true voltition thing. This really, like, this seems like a cool, neat little thing, but I wouldn't buy an $1,100 motherboard for it. Oh, you don't get an M.2 adapter card. Well, at least that's good. Oh, I guess the dim.2. Wait, what goes on the dim.2 then? Is there a... Get... Oh, they need the dim.2 just to get 5 M.2 drives on the freaking board! Man, you gotta give credit to MSI for figuring out how to cram that many M.2 slots onto this board. There's a good reason this has like an 8-layer PCB. It's almost certainly all of the M.2s. Because ASUS over here is like, okay, so first we put like 3 M.2 drives on the actual board. This thing's eATX as well. This is ATX. This is an ATX board. They fit 5 M.2 drives on here. ASUS over here is like, okay, so first we get 3 M.2 drives onto the board. And then we still need this adapter card to get 2 more. Admittedly, the drives on that dim.2 will probably run significantly cooler than whatever you can manage on the MSI board, but like this MSI board is also like basically a third of the price of the Maximus Extreme. So this board is just like this, like they ran out of ideas. They ran out of ideas and they just slapped a bunch of shit together and they were like, well, like this board just kind of looks like they wanted to cram as much shit onto the tech specs as possible. And they managed that. It's got a Gen 5 M.2 slot. It's just that literally any motherboard with an with the dual X8 PCIe slots will do that too. And for like a third of the price. Imagine that. And so this is like to be fair, there's other motherboards like this. Like Gigabyte has the Z690 Aorus Extreme. I'm sure when the Godlike comes out from MSI, it's going to be the same thing. Actually, if I would not be surprised if MSI manages to somehow get the Godlike to be more expensive than the Extreme, which I would love to know how they're going to manage that. Actually, it's not that hard. Like, they're just going to call it a Godlike, and then they're going to put a $1,200 price tag on it, right? Like, you don't actually have to justify to the customer why the motherboard is supposed to be $1,100. You just say it is $1,100, and somebody's going to buy it because they don't know any better. Like, admittedly, this does have, like, Thunderbolt and 2.5 gig LAN and 10 gig LAN, and they actually squeezed a decent number of USB ports onto the back. You don't get display pass-through, but even the Gigabyte Z690 Extreme doesn't do display pass-through because, again, it's just like the Thunderbolt ports are there to get a tick mark on the spec sheet, I'm assuming. What else is there? Yeah, no, I just don't like this board. Like this is basically the bad version of the Apex. This is a great motherboard, and this is what happens when you screw up that board. you take this, which is an incredible overclocking, just this is probably one of the best Z690 motherboards there is, if not the best Z690 motherboard there is. And then you slap pointless garbage onto it until you get this at $1,100. Like, why? Actually, I just realized something. So ASUS calls the like painted capacitors that they have. That's actually what's going on with the black capacitors is just like if you are a large enough customer for one of the capacitor manufacturers, you can just ask them to give you a custom paint job. So ASUS has, where is it? Because I just noticed, 10K black metallic capacitors. So I wonder if they have that same thing on for the Apex marketing, or if they came up with some new marketing term for the SP caps. Because I think that would have been kind of funny if they came up with a new marketing term for the SP caps. SMD capacitors. Oh, they just stole what I call them. Okay, to be fair, it's not like I came up with the idea. That's literally what they're called. They're SMD capacitors. Yeah, they could have literally said 3 terminal SP caps, and I'd be over the roof for that. Because that is like the peak variant of an SP cap is the 3 terminal version. But yeah, so I really like the Apex. I do not like the Extreme at all. Mostly because of the price tag. Yeah, also because of what they're doing with the PCIe slots. Like, it's just so dumb. Like, I still wouldn't forgive the price tag if they didn't do that, but I'd be less annoyed if they didn't do that. Because, like, the thing is, if you actually want to cram a stupid number of M.2 drives onto a motherboard, you're better off getting an MSI board for $400 than you are getting this. Which is completely absurd. This is an $1,100 motherboard. How can it be just completely outclassed in anything by a $400 motherboard, right? Also, the VRM is inferior to what you get on the Apex for reasons I've already mentioned. The memory overclocking is inferior to what you get on the Apex for obvious reasons. The Apex has a bigger postcode, which is... which, like, yep, that's that is a better... That makes that motherboard better, as far as I'm concerned. So... Yeah. I'd love to know who buys boards like this. Like, I'd really love to... Actually, I don't. No. I have a pretty good idea. I don't. Anyway, so yeah, that's kind of the ASUS lineup. Like, so the Extreme is just a straight up big... Oh, wait, no, we missed the Hero. I assume that the last board, like, we got the Extreme, then there's, like, the... So you thought the Extreme wasn't overpriced enough? Here's the $2,000 version with a water block. Last I checked, full cover water blocks probably cost, like, maybe $300 in manufacturing, but don't let that worry you. $2,000. Also, you can probably get better better CPU cooling by just getting a really good custom, like, core only water block than one that also tries to cool the chipset and VRM. But anyway, last board we've got the Hero. Now the Hero is $600, isn't it? It's $600 if I remember correctly. Hero, yes, $600. I'm assuming 8-layer PCB, if I could find that even. Man, this is so annoying how their website isn't consistent, but Gigabytes is worse. Now that I think of it. Actually, no. I feel like both Asus and Gigabyte website are roughly on par in terms of annoyingness to navigate. Because they're both way too animated. Okay, well, this is the cheapest board with the differential sensing, which is... Like, this is actually a really cool feature. It's just not worth $600 as far as I'm concerned, so... that's kind of the end of that. Wait, is this not on an 8? This has to be on an 8-layer PCB. I'm like 99% sure that the Z590 version was on an 8-layer PCB. Okay, let's just go to the tech specs. 6400 plus. Yeah, so this has like the same overclocking capabilities as the Extreme. Hey, it's got dual X8. Yay. It's got 5 M.2 slots. Does it do anything stupid with them? Okay, Hyper M.2 card. That's fine. That's an add-in card. I am okay with add-in cards. PCIe 4.0 X4. Okay, what? Oh, that's what they're doing. Okay, so I guess the idea is that it's really hard to get a dual M.2 add-in Gen 5 add-in card. That's still dumb though. Like the board is $600, just include a dual M.2 card then. Because, yeah, so what they're doing, because the thing is the CPU supports X8, X4, X4. And so to simplify that, they have that M.2_1 slot on the board. I still think that should just be part of the add-in card. Like, what, like, that's the whole point. Like, just, so ultimately, again, like, at least this isn't $1,100. At least it isn't $1,100. Like, this is positively a good deal compared to the Extreme. But it also only has 2.5 gig LAN, whereas you can get like $470 motherboards that have dual 2.5 gig or 10 gig, you know, if you want better networking. What else is there? You get flex key, retry. Wait, stop skipping, you horrible website. Start but. Okay, I've given up. Is it clear CMOS button, BIOS flashback button? Yeah, it's like. You get, wait, this has Thunderbolt? Okay, that kind of makes sense at this price point, I guess. Actually, not even I guess, like that makes sense at this price. Do they have a DisplayPort input? No, they don't. Okay. Which the MSI Ace does. Like, the MSI Ace literally has, like, mini DisplayPort inputs for the Thunderbolt. Yeah, you get 2 Thunderbolt 4 ports, but you don't get you don't get display pass-through on them, so if you care about that, well, you don't get it. This, again, is just, like it's $600. And wait, they put an OLED screen over the I/O shield. Of course they put an OLED screen over the I/O shield. That is an OLED screen, right? Like, that's not just some... That is an OLED screen, yes. So they put an OLED screen over the I/O shield. I mean, on the I/O shield. What the, like... Or, actually, that's not the I/O shield, the I/O cover. Why am I not surprised? Of course they put an OLED screen on the board. Like, the thing... Okay, so let's think about this. So, if I wanted Thunderbolt, I could get a ProArt for, like, $400-ish. If I wanted 10 gig, I could get a ProArt for, like, $400-ish. This doesn't even do 10 gig. That would also still get me 2.5 gig. If I want dual X8, I could get a Pro... I know why the ProArt doesn't have a postcode. Why doesn't the ProArt have a postcode? Because it would tank sales of the Hero. Maybe. But, like, to me, it would basically be it would tank the sales of the Hero. Because, like, if the ProArt had a postcode, the only thing you'd be really losing out is USB Type-A ports. Right? Which I'm, like, I realize I'm a bit abnormal in the fact that I really do need a lot of Type-A. Yeah. Because, like, the unique feature, because if you compare this to the Strix E, well, the Strix E doesn't do X8, X8, if I remember correctly. Right? Like, that's the whole progression, is, like, you go from the Strix E to the Hero. Yeah, this doesn't do X8, X8. So this does X8, X8. It has, you know, it has Thunderbolt. It's got your 2.5 gig. It's got some USB ports. It's got Wi-Fi 6E. It's got the clear CMOS button, the BIOS flashback button. It's got all of the overclocking functionality. And it's got a postcode. And it's $600. And, like, I don't think... Like, I don't see it. Like, I still, like, it's like with most of the other boards, like I said, it's just like, okay, why should this be $600? Like, what does this do that makes it worth $600? And, like, I have no idea, to be completely honest. It looks like an overpriced ProArt if you look at it from a feature set standpoint, other than the fact that, like, Asus added a postcode, they added the differential sensing, they added, like, the safe boot functionality. I guess technically the VRM is bigger, but the VRM on Z690 is borderline irrelevant because 12th gen pulls less power than 11th gen did, so you really don't need that much power delivery. Well, you do still need kind of a lot of power delivery. You need more power delivery than you would need for, like, the average Ryzen motherboard, but you don't need that much, okay? So yeah, and also you can get a comparable VRM to this on a like $470 gigabyte motherboard. So yeah, I don't really see the like that's not that big a price gap, right? I don't, like once you're at $500 for the board, $130 not that big a difference, but I wouldn't spend $600 on a motherboard. Like I just wouldn't. Like not a motherboard that looks like this. Apex? Sure. This? Sure. I'd spend $700 on this. I wouldn't spend $600 on this. Because like yeah, no. I wouldn't. Alright, this is on 90 amp power stages. So it's not even on the really expensive ones, it's on just the like the sort of like standard issue intercell parts, I'm assuming. Not that I think like the thing is like if the board is $600, I want to know where my $600 went. And evidently a decent chunk of them went into that screen over the IO, like in the IO cover. Real shame that, like, last I checked, OLED screens don't make your CPU go faster. Or really make anything go faster. Right, like admittedly, you could make the same kind of argument about the SP caps. They don't really, like, they might save you maybe 5 millivolts of core voltage, if even that. But I'd rather pay extra for SP caps than for an OLED screen. Yeah. So I wish they made a Hero Light, but they didn't. Like they made a Strix E, which doesn't share like the main most useful feature of the Hero. Like that's the thing is the Hero is this weird mishmash of functionality from the Strix E. Actually, it's not even functionality from the Strix E. It's like it's like a mishmash of it's actually no well no, the best way to describe it is a watered down Apex. But the motherboard, the cheapest motherboard in Asus's lineup that most closely matches like the actual functionality is the ProArt, right? Which this is like $400. This is way cheaper. Overclocking wise, if they both came with the same BIOS options, they would clock the same. Though this is Asus, so I wouldn't be surprised if they like restricted the memory voltage on this board to something lower than what they allow on the Hero. Just because like that's the Asus thing to do. Like their DDR4 Strix boards have a 1.8 volt voltage limit. Which is still way too damn high for daily, but just low enough to be a problem for extreme overclocking. You know, like it's exactly the just low enough to be annoying. This doesn't have a postcode, which that's I think the biggest downside to this motherboard in my opinion. And then, like, but other than that, like, you get the dual XA, you get your 4M.2 slots on the board itself. I'm assuming you can probably configure that secondary X8 slot to buy 4x. Well, maybe not, actually. Maybe it doesn't support that. But even then, I don't know that, like, personally, I wouldn't consider that too much of a loss. So, yeah. No, I don't like the Hero. It's too damn expensive. It's $600 freaking dollars, and like it also doesn't even match the Ace on functionality. Like the MSI Ace board has display pass-through on the Thunderbolt ports. This doesn't, because they didn't put in the display inputs. Also, the Ace has dual 2.5 gig LAN, if I remember correctly. Right, like this is a admittedly, this board is eATX, whereas the Hero is ATX. Right? Is it ATX? It is ATX, right? Yeah, the Hero is admittedly ATX, but I feel like once you're spending $600 for a motherboard, you like getting a case that fits your motherboard is probably not that big a deal, is it? Right? Yeah, so, and you get your Type-C, and you get your dual 2.5, and then you get your Thunderbolt, and then you get your DisplayPort inputs for your Thunderbolt, and you get your Wi-Fi. Both of these boards have a backplate now. I'm assuming this has a backplate. This better have a backplate. This is $600. Like, admittedly, the backplate also doesn't make the motherboard any faster, but it's one of those things that, like, if you're mounting heavy heat sinks or just, like, it helps make the motherboard more physically robust. You know, like, PCBs don't like being bent a bunch. So it's one of those things where it's like, you know, I'm getting a, like, if you're going to have an OLED screen, you should have a backplate. It's just like, okay, I can't find anything. I'm guessing it doesn't have a backplate for the board. What about the memory? DDR5 overclocking strength. Yeah. Power solution. Seen that all before. So the Hero, it's mega overpriced. I don't know what else to say. So, yeah, I think in the ASUS motherboard lineup, it's like, so the ProArt is cool, the Apex is cool. I've said the Apex is cool way too many times at this point, but it's true, it's cool. It's probably, like, more boards like this, please. Less boards like everything else. Especially considering that, like, 4 memory sticks of DDR5 is nothing but pure pain. Yeah, so, like, ProArt is cool, the Apex is cool. There's also the Dash G, which, you know, if you're looking for an MATX motherboard, you really don't have that many options. And also don't see anything fundamentally wrong with the Strix other than that. Like, the thing is, ITX boards are expensive because it's just difficult to build little motherboards, right? Like, especially when you try to cram this much functionality into them, it's just like, yeah, I can get why this would be expensive. It's got more layers than every other motherboard in the ASUS lineup because it's so damn small. But then the rest of the lineup is just kind of like, you get less stuff, you pay the same or you pay more, and you get less stuff. And it's just like, I'm not a fan of that. So, anyway, that's my thoughts on, like, the entire Z690 motherboard lineup from ASUS. And for the most part, it's just like, none of these are fundamentally bad boards. They just also aren't very cost effective. Like, they're significantly less cost effective than the vast majority of the competition, with the exception of ASRock, because ASRock has made, like, 2 types of Z690 motherboard. Trash Z690 motherboards and overpriced Z690 motherboards. So at least ASUS has that going for them. They haven't managed to, like, beat ASRock on the, like, in terms of motherboard, you know, option stuff. Anyway, yeah, so that's it for this video. Thanks for watching. Like, share, subscribe, leave any comments, questions, suggestions down in the comment section below. If you'd like to support what I do here with Actually Hardcore Overclocking, I have a Patreon. There's also the AHOC Teespring store where you can pick up shirts, stickers, posters, you know, the usual YouTuber merch. Both Patreon and Teespring help out immensely with running the channel, so it'd be much appreciated if you'd check them out. And that's it for the video, so thank you for watching, and goodbye.